Marvin Gray entered the bank as a customer, but left as the hero of a revolution. Humiliated by the manager and accused of fraud, he turned that day into the beginning of monumental change. What he did next will astonish even those who have seen it all. But let's start from the very beginning. Marvin Gray, dressed in a sharp business suit, stepped into a bustling bank branch in a lively part of the city. In his hand, he held a check for $75,000. He joined the line, quietly observing the way the staff interacted with customers. His gaze lingered on the manager, a 50-something blonde man who spoke to clients with a subtle air of superiority. When it was his turn, Marvin calmly approached the counter. "Good afternoon. I'd like to cash this check," he said, handing over the document and his ID. The manager, Stanley Price, squinted at the check and then at Marvin. Slowly, with visible disdain, he took the papers and studied the customer. That's quite a large sum," he remarked, pushing the documents to the edge of the counter. "Are you sure this check isn't fake?" Remaining composed, Marvin replied, "I'm sure. All the information is accurate, and the check is made out to me." "Of course," Stanley muttered with a smirk. "We'll have to verify it. Wait here." He loudly called over a security guard, drawing the attention of other customers. People began turning their heads, some whispering among themselves. The tension in the room started to build. "This man presented a suspicious check," Stanley explained loudly to the guard. "We need to ensure it's not fraudulent." Marvin sighed quietly, understanding what was happening. "May I speak with someone responsible for these verifications?" he suggested. "I'll call the police first," Stanley interrupted curtly. "This is a serious matter." Marvin noticed a woman in line discreetly recording the situation on her phone. The security guard, though visibly uneasy, positioned himself beside Marvin, ready to act on Stanley's orders. "You have no grounds to detain me," Marvin said calmly, meeting Stanley's gaze directly. Ignoring Marvin's words, Stanley grabbed his phone and began dialing. Customers in line started voicing their disapproval. "This is too much!" exclaimed an elderly woman standing nearby. "The man hasn't done anything wrong. Why are you treating him like this?" Stanley paid no attention. Convinced he was doing the right thing, he pressed forward. Yet no one in the room knew who Marvin Gray really was, or the repercussions the bank would face after that day. After several minutes of tense waiting, 2 police officers entered the bank. Their arrival added to the drama. Some customers quietly slipped away to avoid involvement, while others continued recording on their phones. "Who made the call?" one officer asked, scanning the room. Stanley immediately stepped forward. "It was me. This man attempted to cash a check for a large sum, but his documents are suspicious. We have reason to believe the check is fraudulent." The officers turned their attention to Marvin. He stood calmly, hands in his pockets. One of the officers approached him. "Good afternoon, sir. May I see your documents?" he asked politely. Marvin, unflinching, handed over his ID and the check. The officer examined them carefully, frowning slightly, but finding nothing amiss. "Sir, are you sure this check is fake?" the officer asked Stanley. "Of course. Look for yourself," Stanley snapped, unwilling to admit the possibility of a mistake. "The amount is too large for someone like him." "Someone like him," Marvin repeated, his voice calm but weighted with reproach. At that moment, a tall man in a business suit entered the bank. It was Alex, a representative from the head office. He paused in the doorway, noticing the police and the gathered crowd. Approaching the scene, his eyes widened as he recognized Marvin. "Mr. Gray?" Alex called out, loud enough for everyone to hear. Stanley froze, immediately turning to Alex. "Do you know this man?" one of the officers asked. "Of course," Alex replied, stepping forward. "This is Marvin Gray, our new owner." The room fell into a stunned silence. The officers exchanged glances before one of them returned Marvin's documents with an apologetic nod. "Apologies for the inconvenience, sir," the officer said. Stanley's face turned ghostly pale. He stammered, trying to form words, but Marvin raised a hand, silencing him. "You called the police without bothering to verify my information. You humiliated me in front of everyone here, basing your actions solely on your biased assumptions. That's exactly what I wanted to evaluate at this branch." Marvin's gaze swept over the employees, who had stopped pretending to work and now stood as silent witnesses to the pivotal moment. "Are we done here?" Marvin asked the officers. They nodded and left, leaving Stanley standing in a state of shock. Without another word to him, Marvin turned to Alex. "Let's go. We have a lot to discuss." As Marvin and Alex walked away, the customers began clapping, their applause following Marvin as he exited. Everyone in the bank understood that this day would mark a turning point, not just for the branch, but for the institution as a whole. After the police left, a heavy silence hung over the bank branch. All eyes were fixed on Stanley, who stood frozen, unsure of what to do. Alex, visibly angry, instructed all employees to gather in the conference room for an urgent meeting. "What's going on?" one teller whispered to a colleague. "Looks like our new owner has some questions for Stanley," the other replied, barely hiding a smirk. In the conference room, the employees gathered as Marvin stood by the wall, observing quietly. Alex took the front of the room, his face a mixture of disappointment and anger. "Today's incident wasn't just a mistake," Alex began, staring intently at Stanley. "It's a reflection of a deep-seated issue within this bank." I was just following procedures," Stanley stammered, nervously tugging at his tie. "Procedures?" Marvin, silent until now, stepped forward. "Or your personal biases. You didn't verify the check. You didn't try to investigate. You immediately called the police because you decided I looked suspicious." The employees exchanged glances, realizing their manager wouldn't be able to talk his way out of this. "Mr. Gray, I didn't mean to," Stanley began, but Marvin cut him off. "You thought your behavior would go unnoticed," Marvin said. "But everything you did was witnessed by customers, employees, and even the police. And as we speak, videos of your actions are spreading across social media." Stanley paled. His trembling hands fumbled for his phone as he hurriedly scrolled through his newsfeed. Several employees were already looking at their phones, watching a viral video of the incident, accompanied by hundreds of comments. "But I was just doing my job," Stanley nearly shouted, but no one in the room came to his defense. "Your job is to protect the interests of this bank and its clients," Marvin replied calmly. "Instead, you've turned us into the center of a scandal that damages the reputation of everyone who works here." Marvin turned to address the employees. "I purchased this bank because I want to change the way people feel in financial institutions. This should be a place of trust, not humiliation. Everyone working here must share these values." He turned to Alex. "Start an internal investigation. I want a report on every complaint related to this branch and its management." Stanley tried to interject, but Alex cut him off. "Stanley, your actions today have caused significant harm to the bank. You are suspended until the investigation is complete." Many employees nodded in agreement, relieved to see justice finally served. Marvin, addressing the room once more, said, "Today, I saw the weaknesses in a system we are going to fix, but I also want to say this. Those of you who believe in change will be part of something bigger." The meeting ended, and as the employees began to leave, someone started clapping softly. One of the younger staff members approached Marvin hesitantly, offering a shy smile. "Thank you, sir. We've been waiting for someone to notice what's been happening here for a long time." Marvin smiled in return, knowing that he had taken the first step toward real change. The morning after the incident, the video continued to spread online, fueling public outrage. Social media erupted with calls for justice and demands to address bias in banking. While the bank's reputation was at risk, Marvin saw an opportunity for change. At a press conference, Marvin stated, "Yesterday's incident showed how bias and stereotypes destroy trust. As the owner of this bank, I take full responsibility for fixing this." He announced reforms, bias training for employees, improved customer service standards, and anonymous audits to prevent future incidents. Within days, the branch felt the shift. Stanley's suspension sent a clear message. Toxic behavior would no longer be tolerated. A respected young employee was appointed as interim manager, inspiring confidence in the staff. A week later, Marvin returned to meet with employees and customers. Open and approachable, he shared his vision. This branch will become an example of how financial institutions can serve everyone equally. A young teller approached him and apologized. "I saw what happened and did nothing. I'm sorry." "The key is to learn from it," Marvin replied. "Now you can be part of the change." Stanley attempted to defend his actions in the press, claiming professional caution, but his justification fell flat, and his reputation was ruined. A month later, the branch was transformed. Employees worked confidently, clients were treated with respect, and the gratitude board displayed customer thanks and the story of Marvin's reforms. At the opening of a new customer service hall, Marvin addressed staff and residents. "This bank now belongs to all of you. We've proven that systems can change with determination and persistence." The applause that followed marked the start of a new chapter, one of equality, trust, and a commitment to serve the community.